Welcome to the Open Apple podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a long-time user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 64 for October 2016. I'm your co-host, the first, Quinn. With me as always is co-host the second, Mike McGinnis. How you doing, Mike?
Yay, I'm here. I'm all right. It's, today's a good day, bad day thing, but we're recording another episode, so it's probably on balance more good than bad. Excellent.
Well, we'll focus on the retro stuff, which is hopefully all good.
Yeah, I think so. I saw Chris Torrance this morning. That's a name you probably recognize from the Assembly Lines book reprint. He's also got that YouTube series of vodcasts, which is pretty awesome. You should check that out. And I just dumped a whole bunch of Apple IIs and 2GSs on him. So good luck, Chris.
Ah, that's where those are going. I saw the photos on Facebook. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I've been looking around my loft here lately, and I just see these piles of Apple IIs that, I hate throwing away anything with that rainbow Apple logo on it. But, at the same time, you reach that age where you realize you're probably not going to have time to get to everything that you want to get to in life. And maybe it's time to thin the stacks a little bit and give them a new home to people who can use and enjoy them. Because right now they were just collecting dust and not doing anyone any good. So enjoy, Chris.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think I realized quite how many Apple IIs you have. That was a pretty big stack there if you're just thinning a little bit and you still had that many to give away.
Yeah, that was about a third of the 2GSs and a third of the 2Es.
Wow.
I still got to find more homes for those things.
Yeah, well, Chris Torrance is a friend of the show and a friend of both your hosts as a result of Kansas Fest. So hopefully he'll go and do some cool videos and other stuff with those.
Yeah. How are you, Quinn?
I'm good. I have to say one last thing on that subject, that I was slightly annoyed that in your photo on Facebook, you had all of the Duo discs stacked on their respective 2Es, which was very nice. And one of them was backwards, and it drove me crazy.
Oh no! Boo.
Yeah. So next time you're piling computers in your car, if you could just make sure to arrange them properly, that would really help me out.
I'll absolutely do that. Yes. I'll leave a little note, a handwritten note for Quinn.
Yeah. Now you're just going to leave them all on crazy angles. You're going to have like Duo discs on the GSs and just to troll me.
Bungee corded to the roof of my car and on the hood.
Yeah. Dragging behind the car from the power cord. Yeah.
like some weirdly hunted electronic animal or something.
That's right.
It is Colorado,
GS thrown over your hood. Yeah. All right. Good time. So, I'm doing good. Back to your question. I guess the only thing I have to intro retro-wise is we said on the last show that we thought we'd found an incompatibility between the Megabeep 2C Plus ROM that I was selling at Kansas Fest and may sell again if I can find the time. It seemed to be incompatible with John Brooks's new release of ProDOS 2.4. The good news is we found that not to be the case. So if anyone was reading the show notes last month or following me on Twitter, then you know that. It looks like it was reported by listener James, and it looks like he may have just gotten a bad ROM. So, I tested all the ROMs I sold in my personal 2C Plus, but I didn't, test every single piece of software or anything like that because that would have taken forever. So, I did some basic boot tests and stuff on each one, but apparently I didn't boot DOS 2.4 or even some other versions of ProDOS he said didn't work as well. So it seems pretty clear that was a bad ROM. So I sent him the code and offered a replacement for that.
Great.
So good news for anyone else who is considering the Megabeep and or is concerned that they won't be able to run ProDOS. And many thanks to John and James for helping us debug that problem. I know that John did a whole bunch of work trying to figure out, where it was crashing because James is the only person who could reproduce it. So John did a bunch of special builds with debug codes in them, trying to figure out where it was dying in the startup process. It was pretty cool.
That's one of the great things about the hobby community. I mean, as small as it is, the creators actually have time to sit down and work out like a problem that one or two people have. Try and get Apple to even acknowledge that your mail app is crashing or something these days, right?
Yeah. John showed remarkable dedication to fixing this problem, which was really cool.
Nice.
This is Mark Simonson, and you're listening to the Open Apple Podcast.
All right. So I guess we don't exactly have a full interview this month, but speaking of John Brooks, we have an excerpt from an interview that he did with Ken Gagne of Juiced.GS fame. And what's funny about this is that this is the second third-party interview we've run with John Brooks on the show. Maybe one of these days we'll get him on the show in person, and then it will be the hat trick of interviews for the Canadians in the audience. But shall we just roll right on into that interview?
Sure. Now, this is, again, if you want the whole interview, you got to read the Juiced.GS issue that it's in, but this is just a little 10-minute segment to whet your appetite. And if you like it, and I hope you do, go subscribe to Juiced.GS because it's a great magazine.
Yeah, good stuff.
This is Ken Gagne with Juiced.GS, the last remaining print publication dedicated to the Apple II. Today is Sunday, September 18th, 2016, just 3 days after the release of ProDOS version 2.4, the first update to this 8-bit operating system for the Apple II since 1993. Today I'm chatting with John Brooks, President and CTO of Blue Shift Inc., veteran Apple II programmer, first-time Kansas Fest attendee in 2016, and developer of the recent release of version 2.4 of ProDOS. Hi, John.
Hi, Ken. How you doing?
Good. How are you today?
Good.
ProDOS version 2.4 just came out this month. I have a ton of questions all about your motivation, the technicalities behind it. Let me start by asking, the Apple IIgs just turned 30 years old this month, September 2016, and you've been programming for it almost since day one with releases such as The Hunt for Red October for Datasoft and Rastan for Taito. Those are Apple IIgs games. Why are you now focusing on an 8-bit release?
A couple reasons. Getting back into the Apple II kind of computer programming and just user scene last year, I saw there was a lot of amazing software to pull things off of floppies. And I have a massive collection of floppies that have been in a storage unit for the last 20-some years, and I wanted to recover it. And so kind of getting up to speed with what the current situation was with these floppies, some of which are losing data kind of rapidly. It kind of surprised me to realize that there were two versions of ProDOS that people were using. One, version 2 of ProDOS would only work on the newer Apple IIs, and the version 1.x of ProDOS 1.9 is the most recent. That would only work on the older 6502-based computers. And so anyone who was trying to release software to help people move data from the old failing floppies onto modern systems and kind of preserve it for the next generation or for history, it was kind of an awkward situation of having multiple OSs for multiple generations of Apple II computers. So I thought that's something that really should be improved if possible.
How long have you been working on the ProDOS update?
I think I started it in August. It was really prompted by a post on the CompSys Apple II, where another developer made a dual boot option where you could have both ProDOS 1.9 and ProDOS 2.03 both on the same disk, and then you could pick which one you wanted to boot. And so while that was good, I was like, well, it still is kind of painful to have to have both of them on your disk, because particularly for 5.25-inch floppies, you've only got 140K. And so doubling the size of the OS on that isn't really ideal. And really, this is something that almost all the code is common between 1.9 and 2. It's just a few really nice features from ProDOS 2, which we'd like to be able to use on older machines. And the reason that ProDOS 2 doesn't work on the older machines is that it's using this handful of newer opcodes for newer CPUs. That's the primary reason. And so if we could just fix that, then we could make a universal ProDOS that anyone making new recovery software or new retro Apple II programs could use as one version of ProDOS that would boot on all Apple IIs. So that's kind of the impetus.
There are so many new features and improvements and fixes in this release. I'm curious to know, what feature of ProDOS version 2.4 are you the most proud of?
Well, so I think the new program launcher that what I call Bitsy by is the thing that I spent the most time on. Myself and Peter Furry, the Cucumba, who's also got credit on it. that was a real it's some of the most torturously difficult code I've written in my 30 some years of programming, and that's because we tried to pack a ton of features into only 300 hex bytes. So there's a hard limit on how much memory is available for that bytecode, the quit code. But I really wanted to be able to select devices by slot using number keys, so you wouldn't have to tab around and tab one too many times and have to tab all the way around again. I wanted to really be able to handle directories that had lots of files in it, because I have a CFFA card, with lots of Apple II programs on a USB stick, and it's not just 10 files in a directory. I mean, if I've got 100 files in there, having to scroll through them all takes a long time. So being able to type the first letter of the file name and have it jump right to it, those are all things that that I really wanted for myself, and I think that kind of goes to the whole origin spirit of the Apple II, which is, hey, the machine can do whatever you want, make it do something that is what you want, and it will likely be useful to others as well. And so it's really a community effort of lots of people making things that are cool for themselves and sharing. And so I wanted to do the same thing.
So you've released version 2.4 of ProDOS. There are so many other programs that were developed to work with earlier versions. Is there the possibility that your update will break existing ProDOS programs such as AppleWorks?
I guess it's possible. I mean, that is one of the difficulties in trying to. That was one of the difficulties I ran into trying to create ProDOS, was how do I test it? Because I'm not a big company with a large developer or testing group. So I started testing in mid-August, and then, of course, released it mid-September. So I went through about a month of testing, and I went through about 9 or 10 releases to the testing, to the user community. But yeah, really, once it was released, and it certainly saw more use in a broader audience, and within a couple of days, the issue of compatibility with non-Apple machines, and there was a couple of bugs in places. So, but that also, again, seems to be kind of the modern era of development in many ways as well, which is put something out there, let the community use it how they use it, and then that will really inform what improvements and fixes need to be made.
So there's a high degree of confidence that this will not break existing programs. Does ProDOS 2.4 enable the creation of new programs that would not be backward compatible, that would not run on 203? A
little bit. So there's some of the real tiny program, specifically the mini BAS, the mini basic launcher. It fits in one block of memory because it's expecting to be called from Bitsy by, and one of the reasons that it can fit in one block is because Bitsy by doesn't pass the entire long path name of the file that's being launched to the next program. Instead, it only passes just the file name up to 15 characters, and the whole rest of the path it sets in ProDOS with a set prefix. So any program being launched by Bitsy by can reduce the buffer size for the next file to use from 65 bytes down to 16 bytes. And that savings is pretty significant when you're trying to fit in one block, which only has 512 bytes. Being able to save that 40 or 50 bytes is a big deal. But other than that, no, there's really not anything fundamental that 2.4 enables. There's been some discussion on the CompSys Apple II group about making some changes that would be more significant, such as being able to dynamically load device drivers or use the language card memory in a more generic fashion. But those are all things that could potentially impact compatibility. And so I really just wanted to get a universal ProDOS out there first, and then again, once people have it and use it, we could have community-wide discussions about what would the next step that would be most valuable to people, what that would look like.
This release was timed to coincide with the 30th anniversary of the 2GS. Is that correct?
Yeah. Again, I was working on it in August, and I realized, September 15th is going to be the 2GS 30th anniversary, and it needs testing for several weeks. So it just seemed like the stars aligned on that one in many ways.
What would you say is the connection between the release of an 8-bit OS and the release of a 16-bit computer?
Well, ironically, there's a lot of code in ProDOS that is GS specific. It patches the toolbox, the GS toolbox in ROM. It patches some bugs. It adds features so that when it's called by the Finder, it can launch an 8-bit program for the Finder and then quit back to the Finder. And a fair amount of stuff that I added to 2.4 was specifically for 2GS users and kind of usability in mind. So like one of the options I have is that when you launch an 8-bit program from the Finder, and of course the Finder will start by launching ProDOS in a special mode so that ProDOS knows that it's being asked to run 8-bit programs on behalf of the Finder. When it's launched in that mode, if you hold down the Option key, then when the 8-bit program quits, it will not quit all the way back to the Finder. It will stay in BitsyBy, and then BitsyBy can use BitsyBoot to quit back to the Finder whenever the user is ready. And so the reason that's useful is because I often find that when I am in GSOS in the Finder and I run something in 8-bit world, I often don't want to run just one program. I may want to run 2 or 3 programs, or I may want to run the same program 2 or 3 times using resets and reboots and that kind of thing. And so in the past, if you run an 8-bit program from the Finder and then that 8-bit program crashes, you have to reboot the whole machine, relaunch GSOS. It takes a long time. And so one of the very useful changes that I've found for myself personally with ProDOS 2.4 is the ability to reboot ProDOS 2.4 without destroying the dormant hibernating state of the Finder and GSOS, so that I can run multiple games. I can full iterations of 8-bit development and testing, and then if I need to go back to the Finder or to a 16-bit program, I can just use BitsyBoot to go all the way back to the Finder. So it's enabled different usage patterns than existed previously for 2GS owners.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for this insight into ProDOS 8, John. I know we have so much more we could talk about. In fact, this interview lasted a half an hour, and what we just played here is 10 minutes. The transcript for the entire interview can be found in the September 2016 issue of Juiced.GS, available for purchase online at www.Juiced.GS. My thanks to OpenApple for running this excerpt of our interview. John, I've created a special URL just to find your program. It is ProDOS8.com. That will redirect to the Call Apple page that lists your program. In the meantime, can you also remind our listeners where to find you online?
And then I'm at Twitter at jbrooksbsi. I can be reached there, and happy to talk to people and users and developers alike.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Ken.
All right. Well, that was fun, and like I said, the whole thing is available in. I think it's the latest issue of Juiced.GS. You can find the right one on their webpage. We'll have a link in the show notes. And yeah, it's funny that he's been on the show more times than most of our guests, because most of them are just one-time appearances, and neither of us have talked to him in person.
That's right. Well, except at K-Fest, but yeah. Yeah. So that's, thanks again to Ken for letting us run that here on the show. So in lieu of a longer interview, we've got some news to talk about, and we also have a cool new segment coming up. I'm not going to spoil that, but let's go through some news first, shall we?
It may be old, but there's still news. Apple II news.
So this first item, I think we could have actually talked about it last month, but it fell through the cracks, and I'm sad about that because it's really, really, utterly, fantastically amazing. Which, not to oversell it, but this is an item that I really, really like. So a friend of the show, Brian Peachy, whom we've spoken of much here on the show, he's written some games in the Apple II, including recently one called Retro Fever that we've talked about. And he's done lots of great YouTube videos on Apple II and other retro computing stuff. We'll certainly link to his YouTube channel. And the one that really jumped out here is his latest video. He has acquired a Tiger learning computer. And I had no idea what this thing was or what the Apple II connection with it was. But what it was it was by VTech and or Tiger, I guess, depending on how you view these corporate structures. And it was one of these plastic sort of kids computers, and it had it looked sort of like a laptop, but it wasn't really a laptop. There wasn't a screen under the lid, and had these sort of fake cartridge things. And it just seems like one of these kind of schlocky Toys R Us type, toy computer things. But under the hood, it's actually an Apple II, and it's actually running ProDOS, and it actually boots, and you can see it boot as an Apple II. And then it's got a bunch of software on these cartridge things. And apparently they licensed this technology, and this is really, really late. Do you remember the date on this, Mike? It was 2010 or something, or 2002 or something. It was really, really late.
well beyond when anyone should have been looking to buy a new Apple II off the shelf, yes.
Yeah. I think Brian correctly characterizes this as the last Apple II ever sold. And in fact, on the box, he's got pictures of the box and stuff in his video, and it brags about, contains Apple technology and all this. So they were even trumpeting the fact that it was an Apple II under the hood. So this is a bizarre and fascinating artifact, apparently extremely rare. I've never seen this or heard of this, and he managed to find one new in box, which is amazing. Had you heard of this thing, Mike?
I have, yeah. In fact, Juiced.GS, I think, has done a couple of articles on it over the years. Okay. Again, like you said, very difficult to find. I'm sure they didn't sell all that well, and the ones that did sell probably didn't last very long. It has a very sort of that rugged but very simple look that companies like Kenner used to give their toys to appeal to kids and to appeal to parents who wanted something simple for the kids to learn on, which of course, that's what this was for. But it also gives it, when I see it anyway, to me, that's a very disposable look. You use it for a couple of years, it goes in the trash and you never think about it again. So,
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, there's, over on Juiced.GS, there is a gallery of the Tiger Learning Computer. It was profiled in the, December 2011 issue. And they do mention that this thing came out in 96.
Oh, 96. Oh, okay. I thought it was newer than that. Okay, cool. Still pretty remarkable thing. Yeah. Cause the 2E stopped production, 93? Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So 3 years after that, they licensed this thing. Very cool. Wow, that so I'm really glad that Brian brought that up because I guess if you haven't read older issues of Juiced.GS like me, you might never have heard of this thing. Pretty cool. And
you should, if you have a chance, definitely look at the gallery. There's a close up of like the picture. The laptop itself looks like one of those early sort of dark gray power books, with the rounded front and the little the power book had the little marble for the mouse pointer. This does not, but very similar in style. And in fact, there's a close up of the the open Apple key even has the Apple logo, but instead it just says Player One on it. And it's obviously very dedicated to games. And there are when you lift the lid, the screen there's no screen there. Instead, it has these little cushions for mounting the game cartridges. And then the idea is you plug this into a television and play it that way.
Yeah, that's that is a neat thing. Yeah, it's the industrial design of it looks like they're clearly going for that kind of late 90s, futuristic, stylish look, but also still trying to appeal to kids. So they're kind of walking that line between like schlocky kid computer and like charcoal power book, high tech of the late 90s kind of look. So it's kind of neat. All right. Well, and yeah, I guess if I had one of these things, I would be sorely tempted to try and hack it into like connecting to a floppy drive and so on. But
of course you would.
Yeah. But then again, it's like if I had one of these, they're so rare that it would be a shame to sort of take it apart. But gosh, it would be sorely tempting to try and figure out how to connect a Disk 2 controller to it and boot Loadrunner.
Yep, sounds like a great Hackfest project.
It would be. Just go ahead and send that over, Brian, and I'll get right on that.
Right. It'll never be the same, but...
Yeah. I can't be held responsible for the condition you receive it back in.
Well, come on. It's not like he's going to sell it.
All right. Moving right along. This next item is yours, Mike, so I'm going to leave it in your capable hands.
Right. So this is a page that I found. It was actually published late last year, but it's called The Life of Steve Jobs in Images, and it features a series of black and white, very highly stylized drawings of Jobs' life, and most of them are just Jobs, and we don't care about that. But there's some interesting ones in the early days of Apple and at Atari. Like there's a picture of Woz selling his calculator, Jobs selling his microbus, and then there's a drawing of them and Mike Markkula at the West Coast Computer Fair in 1977, oddly with a bunch of Apple IIc computers. So not very accurate historically, but kind of a fun look through for 30 seconds or so.
Cool. Yeah, I heard something Steve Jobs something. Okay.
Right.
Moving right along. This next item, our first hardware piece of the episode, is a pretty exciting one. Many of us are privileged to own Plowman of A2 Heaven's Apple IIc VGA adapter. It's this awesome little beige box. You plug it into the video expansion port on the back of your 2C. You plug in a VGA monitor, and it just works. And it's amazing, and it's awesome, and I love it. Until now, other Apple II users have not had that luxury. So Plowman has released the Apple II VGA Scaler, which I'm not sure why it's called Scaler exactly, but it appears to be just a full-blown VGA adapter for your regular Apple II with slots, and it sits in a slot, and it has a VGA port on it, and you just plug in a monitor and go. I guess the only downside is it does take up slot, but that's somewhat unavoidable, I guess, for the best possible quality. You wouldn't want to try and just convert composite to VGA. That's always going to be kind of ugly. So this thing also has the same optional, all the different modes that the 2C one does, the scan lines and the amber and the green and all that kind of thing. It looks like a really cool product. This is for the 8-bits only, mind you. This is not for the 2GS. It's a whole other ball of wax, but this looks like a pretty sweet little card.
Available for both NTSC and PAL systems, so that's nice. If you're dealing with European systems, $85 US, and there's a nice write up over on Call Apple where Javier takes you through the ins and outs of installing and using this card, and yeah, it looks pretty gorgeous. The output's very nice.
Very cool indeed. Yeah, I'm really glad that someone is just making simple solutions like this to our video problems. There's been a lot of sort of kind of possible solutions to this for so many years, various arcade converter boards and janky things off eBay that sort of work sometimes. So yeah, Plowman's just just selling things that just work, which is fantastic.
And weren't we getting emails not too long ago from somebody who wanted to be able to switch between amber and green on one monitor?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we talked about that last 2 months.
Looks like this might be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, this would definitely do the job. That listener wanted specifically something that would convert the composite signal, but if they're willing to accept the VGA output, then this would certainly do the job. Because yeah, this has the amber and the green options on it. So if you're still listening after our bungling of that particular question 2 months in a row, then hopefully this might be the answer you're looking for.
We bungled so many things.
Yeah, I've lost track. We have a whole bungling department now. We've had to schedule bungling meetings, and we have bungling TPS reports, and yeah, we've had to
practice.
Yeah, we've had to formalize our bungling. It's become so dense.
We re-record entire segments when we get them right the first time.
That's right. Yeah. Take that, and think about it. The fact that we re-record this whole show sometimes and still get everything wrong.
We add errors.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Let's see. This next item, yeah. So once again, we've been scooped by the Retro Computing Roundtable, as is tradition here on the show. Yeah. So there's this what we're assuming is a Japanese company or something. This company called 8BitDo, which I think is a pun on Nintendo. It's sort of doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but 8BitDo has been making these Bluetooth game controllers for a while now and for various purposes on Kickstarter. And they've gone ahead and made one dedicated to the Apple II. So what's cool about this is that it's a sort of a traditional console game controller, dual sticks, dual analog sticks, 4 buttons on the side, shoulder buttons, yada yada. And the controller itself is Bluetooth. And they've gone and stylized this one with the rainbow stripes on it, which is kind of nice. And it actually has sort of a miniature Apple II dock that you can sit it in, which is kind of cool. So this is making the rounds. It's all over Kickstarter and whatnot. But they've completely buried the lead here. The real exciting part of this is that part of the Kickstarter is that you can buy it comes with, or optionally, you can get a dongle that plugs into your 2C or 2GS joystick port and is the Bluetooth receiver for this thing, or presumably possibly other Bluetooth controllers. So it converts, Bluetooth joystick signals from, I guess, this thing, and I don't know if it works with other controllers, but to the varying resistances that the Apple II expects to see on the joystick port. So that's pretty fantastic. And I think a lot of people are just going to want to order that. I believe on the Kickstarter, you can you can commit to just ordering that piece, I believe. They don't seem to have a package that's all the bits, but they have various combinations of the bits. So that's pretty exciting, and it's not clear if there will be or can be a version for the internal game ports on other Apple IIs, but I mean, it would be trivial to convert that. If you got the dongle, it would be easy enough to wire up a dip socket with the right signals if you got this thing. So that's pretty exciting. Is this something that you would buy, Mike?
I would buy the dongle. I'm not at all excited about the controller, but that's because it's a thumb controller, and thumb controllers blow, or, well, I blow it. I suck at thumb controllers or something. I don't know. I hate that kind of Nintendo controller because it's more than just a stick and two buttons, and my coordination just isn't there. But I agree with you that the Bluetooth thing is awesome. There have been a couple of devices that had or have the wireless connectivity, but I think all of those so far have been slot based, except maybe Nishida Radio. I'm not sure about those products, but this is great if you just have a 2C and you want to plug something into the back.
Yeah, I don't think I would necessarily use the controller part of this because, yeah, I mean, 2 analog sticks and 37 buttons or whatever consoles have these days is kind of pointless on an Apple II, obviously. But yeah, the dongle is cool. So, as we've talked about on the show here, I made my own gamepad for the Apple II a while back, and I can link to the blog posts where I talk about how to do that. And my experience was, it's enjoyable and it's compact. So I like, it's handy to take to K-Fest and stuff. But, if I'm just sitting at home playing games, I actually do prefer, my CH Products joystick. And I think a lot of it is, like you say, the dexterity, I guess the skill set is different, I think, with a gamepad than it is with an old-fashioned analog joystick. And the games are largely tuned for that style of Apple II joysticks. So, the analog thumbsticks have a much smaller dynamic range than a big analog joystick does. So, you can't get quite the same feel. And a lot of games are harder to control. It works really well for games that were basically digital in their controls, like Lode Runner, where it's just basically translating the left and right motion into digital inputs. But for like driving games and stuff, I find the gamepad actually is much harder to use than a joystick because just the analog tuning isn't right for it. So anyway, this is a very neat thing, and I kind of want to buy one and just take apart the dongle and just see how it works and see how it could be maybe adapted to other things. Be cool to do other Bluetooth things with an Apple II.
Definitely. 9 days left to go on the Kickstarter. The original goal was $16,111, and I think that sort of odd number is because they were asking for Hong Kong dollars in it. But they've already exceeded that. They're up to, as we record this, $20,527 US dollars. Again, though, there's 9 days to go. Hopefully we'll get this up before it ends so you can get in on this. And it looks like they're actually going to be looking to ship in January of 2017. So
cool. Yeah, and I think this is a pretty safe bet. They've been making these controllers already for other systems and for other niches, so it's not a new thing. And this thing has been making the rounds like crazy. I think we're the last people to report on this one, so it's safe to say that this is a thing that's happening. All right,
we're the trailing edge here, folks.
That's right. Yes, we're dedicated to bringing you all the news on the Apple II eventually.
Right, we're the trailing edge of the trailing edge.
That's right. Okay, moving right along. Mike, talk to me about the Dynacomp power supply.
Andrew Rowan brings us news that the 240 volt Dynacomp power supply unit has been dissected and diagrammed out. There's a circuit diagram. This was done by a couple of Aussies, Dean Claxon and Mark Cummings. And one of the reasons that they did this was because there does seem to be a lack of any kind of official documentation on power supply circuits, and especially the ones that appear in a lot of the Apple II models. This particular one was the Dynacomp 240 that showed up in the Platinum 2E, and of course the 240 volt is for that area of the world, but they're assuming that the 110 is probably very similar, and that the resources that they're making available through these diagrams and circuits will be great for troubleshooting the US models as well.
So help me out here. what is a Dynacomp power supply? Is that like one of the models of standard ones or something?
Yeah, this is the one that was typically seen in the Platinum Apple IIe.
Okay.
So the IIe that had the keypad and all the latest updates to the motherboard. And again, it seems like for as much as historians like to tout Apple's contributions to switching power supplies, especially with the Apple II and things like that, very little of that beyond the basics has been diagrammed and is easily available to hobbyists today.
Cool. Yeah. Do you happen to know, is Henry Corbis documenting any of that stuff? Because he's, they've reverse engineered a lot of these power supplies in order to make these replacement universal ones. Is that stuff online anywhere? They've been good about sharing all their stuff.
Well, I don't know if he worked on this specific project. I don't see his name here, but I think if you go over to, if you go to reactivemicro.com/downloads, there's a public folder there that has a lot of Henry's resources that he's collected, especially as it has to do with his cloning and reverse engineering efforts. And there's definitely some power supply stuff going on there. So you can check that. I don't know if this specific model is in there or not, but certainly useful resources for anyone who wants to know, on the component level, how this stuff works.
Cool. Yeah, these old Apple II supplies are actually a good learning experience for switching power supplies in general. Because as you alluded to earlier, Apple was a very early adopter of switching power supplies. In the late 70s, early 80s, a lot of these machines still had linear power supplies with great big honking transformers in them, and noisy as all get out. But Apple was quick to get on the switching bandwagon, and so they are good examples of early consumer grade designs for switching power supplies. So by modern standards, they're quite simple to understand, and kind of a nice reference design if you're curious about how switching power supplies work.
Well, I think just in general, isn't it common knowledge or common wisdom these days to, when you get one of these machines, it's probably a good idea to go through and recap stuff. And I know power supplies, certainly on the Apple III and some of these others, that's a good place to start. And having these resources and these guides handy, I have found it very useful for making sure that I didn't, making sure that I got everything and I did it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there are a couple schools of thought on that. I've always been sort of the recap it if it's old school. But interestingly, there are some people that say you shouldn't actually do that unless it's exhibiting problems, just because the modern capacitors aren't exactly the same as old ones. Internal resistances now are lower; they're more efficient, which seems like a good thing. Except that the circuits were designed for the properties of those old capacitors, so if you put modern replacements don't behave quite exactly the same way. So I guess you could potentially create problems by doing that. But I don't know if there's an easy answer as to whether to replace them or not.
Well, unfortunately, now that Reactive Micro or Ultimate Micro, I guess, sells that universal power supply kit, it's easier than ever to go in there and experiment. And, you can buy one of these new ones and pull the old one out and play with it. And if you screw it up, it's not you can still use your machine.
Yeah, exactly. I think, the real answer is if you are concerned about your power supply, buy Henry's replacement.
Yes.
And it's been engineered properly and it will just work. And then you can keep your old one for historical value, or if you want to play with it or whatever, you've still got it. So, for sure. I guess, I could jump in here with a mini tech segment if people are curious about what switching power supplies are. We throw that term around. So switching power supply, the reason it's called that is because it switches the power basically on and off really fast. The job of power supply is to take the 120 or 240 volt mains power supply and convert it down to the voltages that a computer needs, which are really small, 12 volts, 5 volts, minus 5 volts, that sort of thing. And the sort of naive way to do that is to just have a big transformer that, has coils of two different sizes on either side, and 120, let's say, goes in one side. And if you have, 1/10 as many coils on the other side, then you get, 1.2 volts or 12 volts on the other side. And then you can, break it down from there. And then you rectify it to make it into DC and all that. And that's basically what old linear power supplies were. The problem with that is that it requires very big, heavy transformers to do that. And they also, they have a lot of other issues as well. They need, big capacitors and some other things. But so you'll see this on other older machines. We've talked about this in the past. Some of the Apple II clones had linear power supplies in them, for example, and we've talked about how you open up and you see these massive transformers in there, and that's why. And you also see this in like arcade games, for example. By and large, all have linear power supplies in them, so they have these like 40-pound transformers sitting in the bottom of them, and that's why. So really modern pinball machines, they've moved to switching supplies, but. So the advantage of there were some advantages to linear supplies. They made cleaner power without much effort than switching supplies do. So what a switching supply does is it, instead of using a big transformer to step down the voltage, it actually just uses transistors essentially to switch the power on and off really fast. So if you effectively creating a smaller duty cycle. So if you switch the power off and on at say half the duty cycle, then you get these sort of spikes, but on average, then the voltage is half of what it was. So the circuit just sort of sees the average of all of this crazy spiking that you're doing, and you can kind of set that average wherever you want by just switching the power on and off really, really fast. So the nice thing about that is it's extremely efficient. The downside is that switching back and forth is very noisy. So you do have to do a lot of cleanup and smoothing and stuff, which is part of why switching power supplies are much, much more complicated than linear ones are. But they're much, much smaller and much more efficient, and less stress on all the components and all that sort of thing. So that's the gist of it. Switching power supplies, modern ones, are much more sophisticated than that. There's a lot of other things going on. If you've ever cracked open the power supply on your MacBook Pro or something, you'll see a whole bunch of fancy stuff going on in there. Tiny little microchips doing all sorts of things. But anyway, that's the gist of it. So that's switching power supply 101, if anyone was curious.
Awesome.
All right, so we talked last month about the Apple III homebrew project that Chris Zuhar, sorry Chris if I've butchered your last name, we talked about how he had an old Apple III that he was breaking down and he was going to make a homebrew computer out of. Well, looks like he's getting started on that, and he's got a blog, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's just an intro at this point, but he talks about what he's hoping to do with the project because we guilted him into it on this show.
Excellent. Yeah, I will definitely be following that for sure. Right into the RSS feed.
Your fault, Quinn.
Oh, if only I had that sort of influence on the world. Things would be a lot different, let me tell you.
It looks like a great project, and we hope that it doesn't become too much. As we mentioned last time, it's pretty common knowledge that within the hobby that the Apple III was an extremely complicated machine, and so Chris, good luck with that. I think you might need it.
Yeah, I hope he goes the route of just making something out of these parts as opposed to trying to actually clone the Apple III, which would be a challenge for sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of retro challenges, huh? Yeah, see what I did there? Yeah.
Nice. Smooth, baby.
Yeah, and then I blew it by calling attention to it.
That's right. Is the joke funny if you have to explain it?
Yeah, I don't know. Let's keep describing it and see what happens.
Sounds good to me.
I feel like Family Guy, if we keep talking about it long enough, it might get funny again. I don't know.
Every single time.
Yeah. All right, Retro Challenge 2016. This has got to be winter, I guess, is underway, yes?
Yeah, so they used to call them the winter warm-ups, and then the main one would happen after the first of the year. I think they've just kind of given up on calling it the warm-up since they were getting as much participation at this time of year as they were later on. So now it's just the Retro Challenge 2016/10 because it's in October, and that's happening now. And if you want to follow along, you can head over to their blog. We'll have the links in the show notes to a description of all the projects. And this year it's going to be judged by RCR's own Michael Mulhern, who is an Apple II fan. So if you're an Apple II person and you're doing Apple II projects, now's probably the year if you want the judging weighted in your favor.
Definitely.
Well, the other guy is, I think he's a TRS-80 guy, so his life is empty and boring and drab anyway. So the Apple II stuff, he'll go for that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Although you might not want to put any color in your project because the TRS-80 judge might just be alarmed and taken aback. And
that's right.
And
make sure it's not compatible with anything and has no software.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and no sound, or if you have sound, make sure it only comes out of the cassette port because again, you don't want to alarm the terrified TRS-80 judge.
Aw.
We kid. We love all the computers.
We love you.
Okay. Oh, we're going to get mail. Moving right along. Friend of the show, Egan Data Jerk Ford, has done some work on Disk Server. Talk to me about this, Mike.
Yeah, so he initially posted the Apple II Disk Server about 4.5 years ago and really hasn't done anything with it since then. And he's had some requests to update the essentials and went and did exactly that and did some bug fixes and things. So there's he did publish an article last year on the inner workings of the disk and the game servers and how this all works together. We'll have a link to that article in the show notes, but he's asking people to go out there and check it out and see if there are any problems with his new setup. One of the great things about this is that I liked was that he's got the all these cassettes as sound waves, and you can just plug them right into your cassette port, your audio output on your computer, right into the cassette ports on your Apple II, and play it out as a tape from the web. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's an underutilized, I think, feature of the Apple II, that it has a cassette port and that you can literally just play sound files out of your iPod or whatever into it and load them as cassette tapes. We've seen it a little bit with, like the Disk Server or Teza, who makes the YouTube videos about his retro computer collection. He does, Terry Stewart, that's the name I was searching for. He does that a lot. He's always demonstrating any computer that has a cassette port. He'll use that to load software on his YouTube channel. So it's such an easy, low barrier to entry way to get software into a retro computer from the internet. I guess I'm surprised more people don't do it.
Well, even Wendell Sander, who he famously still has an Apple I that works, has a web page showing how he uses his iPod to play WAV files directly out to the cassette on his Apple I software.
Very cool. Yeah, that's a neat way to do it, I think. All right, let's see. So Andrew Wells is apparently rewriting CiderPress in C#. Now, CiderPress is something we've talked about a lot here on the show. It's a graphical utility on Windows for manipulating disk images, and it even does some other stuff like you can view AppleWorks files in it and some stuff like that. And so now, is he the original author here, Mike, or is he just rewriting it?
No, this is a rewrite. It was originally written by, I think, Andy Fadden was his name. And for a while, it was a shareware program. It cost like $20 or something. And then he made it open source and kind of said, I've done what I can do on this, so please, community, continue to work on it. And it sat there for a while because this is basically a Windows-based program, and it worked fine on Windows XP. Well, when that went away and everybody switched over to 7, there were some bugs that popped up, and since then the community has slowly been chipping away at some of that. There's been updates to fix bugs, and now it looks like it's being rewritten in a newer language. This would be what? C Note? Is that the word?
C#.
Gotcha. Yep. So this will be in C#. Now, currently, the current version I know works perfectly well in Wine under macOS, but I don't know if this is going to affect that or not.
Yeah, that's a good question. It should remain compatible, I think. So, I'm assuming he's going to be using the .NET stack as well, which under C# is quite a nice environment. The nice thing about this is it does open the door a crack to cross-platform compatibility. So C# is managed code, so it runs at a higher level than... it's not quite like it's a bit like Java in the sense that how Java is running on a virtual machine. It's not quite that, but C# kind of runs in a protected environment, and it is possible to emulate that environment on other platforms. So a lot of mobile games are actually written in C#. In fact, that's what we do at work, is we write all of our software in C#, and all of our servers and all of our client code that runs on all different phones and tablets is all written in C#. And you can just have kind of a thin managed code layer underneath it that protects you from the hardware, and away you go. So it's conceivable once this project is done that we could get a native-ish Mac version out of it as well, which is pretty cool.
Neat.
All right. So this next one, I also encountered this one, and I'm glad that it made it into the show notes because this is a weird one, pretty random. Go ahead, Mike. I'm going to let you take this one.
All right. So a number of years ago, Steve Wyrick, who does the awesome Apple2history.org, and he had the Simplicity and Sophistication book about the history of the Apple II that was published. he posted some pictures that somebody had made of that Apple I, the wooden Apple I case. That's the famous one you see a lot of pictures of. That's in the Smithsonian, and it's kind of that dark wood. And somebody took a Dremel and carved out Apple I very shakily in the backboard and all that. He posted somebody made a birthday cake of that, and that was pretty awesome. And then more recently, I found someone who had made a cake of not just like a single layer thing, but an entire Apple II with like the CPU and the disk drives and the monitor on top of it, just very elaborate thing. So, and that was pretty awesome to see as well. But now we've got this thing it's apparently this, Bob Mintier posted this. Thank you, Bob, for sharing this. He saw this at the Texas State Fair. They have this thing called the Construction competition, where everything that you build must be made with canned food items, and somebody built an Apple II. It's amazing, just the photo of this thing. And there's a little picture of the Oregon Trail death, only you died of hunger, not dysentery. I think dysentery would have been funnier, but I don't know if you want that associated with food. So anyway, he's got this over, it's in the Apple II enthusiasts Facebook group, and we'll definitely post it. These cans, I can't see what they are. They look like, I can't tell how big this is. So there's not a lot of scale here, but that if those are like, say, like cans of corn that you would hold in your hand, then this thing is massive.
Yeah, that's the impression I got, is that it's quite large, because the sort of the resolution of your structure is set by the size of the can, and this thing has quite a lot of detail in it, so I think it must be quite large. And he's cleverly chosen canned food products with labels that have the right mix of colors. So he's kind of created additional detail by placing the right colored labels near each other and so on to get sort of sub-can resolution. And it's really well done. So that we'll link to the pictures of this thing, and I insist that everyone go look at it.
Yep, and of course, as Jake Harvey comments, it needs RetroBrite.
Yeah, I had no idea that building things out of canned food cans was a thing, but I'm really glad it is, because this is hilarious.
Only in Texas.
Yeah, and I kind of like the dying of hunger, because it's sort of kind of a call out to the construction material there. All right, let's see. Moving right along, we've got a vintage computer BBS list has been updated. I got nothing here. Mike, help me out.
So this is a text-based list that's been, I think, maintained for quite a while. And every now and then a board will come up or go down, and this list gets updated. It's a very, very short list these days. And I think almost all of them are Telnet only. It doesn't look like, maybe a couple are dial-up, but there are 4 total Apple II BBSs listed on here. DJ's Place, which is GBBS Pro. Dura Europos, which is a modified GBBS Pro. RMAC dial number 34 is a Diversidial board, and the Sanctum BBS, which also runs on GBBS Pro. So if you're still looking for that old-fashioned BBS interface experience, there are a few Apple II-based boards. If you're just looking for general retro computing, they've got some Amiga boards, Atari, Commodore, and I imagine at this point nobody's going to kick you off for being an Apple II fan.
Yeah, the funny thing about these sort of rebooted vintage BBSs is that they recreate one important aspect of the BBS experience, and that's waiting and trying forever to get onto them. Because there are so few of them, and there are now sort of, you think about these BBSs used to run in some town or neighborhood in one geographical area, and people only wanted to dial locally, so they were, the pool of people trying to get into them was fairly small, a couple hundred people at any given time trying to get into one. Well, now you've got, every vintage BBS user all around the internet trying to get into this thing. And now there's only 4 of them instead of the thousands that there used to be. So it's arguably much harder to get onto these things than it used to be, and made much worse by, they all effectively get, as we used to say, slash-dotted, where every time one of these things gets posted on a Facebook group or whatever, everyone, of course, immediately goes in and tries to use it, and, you can't get in. So I guess I would say look at this list and then wait for a while, and then hope no one has talked about it recently on any vintage forums anywhere, and then maybe you'll be able to get in. But it is pretty cool. I do like these things a lot.
The one cutoff for the hardware on their end is that it either has to run on hardware built prior to 1993, or the operating system must be originally coded prior to 1903 under emulation. So they really want to ensure that you get that old-timey feel.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I think all the Apple ones I've seen are running on real hardware. And people post pictures of them, and yeah, they just have like a Raspberry Pi or something serving as a telnet bridge. But yeah, the BBS itself is running on real hardware, real floppy disks, the whole 9 yards, which is awesome. Yeah, I actually had a GBBS Pro BBS of my own for a little while. I don't know if I mentioned it on the show yet, but I recently did a blog post where I went through a bunch of my old floppy disks from my youth and dug up a whole bunch of early programming projects from when my age was measured in single digits and things like that. And one of the things I dug up was my brief attempt at a GBBS-based BBS. And it was languishing on 5 or 6 floppies, and I think it's safe to say it should remain there because it was pretty terrible. I couldn't actually even get it to boot. Clearly, it was a work in progress, and I never operated it. But yeah, I was, like many of us, super, super fascinated by BBSs and definitely wanted to run one, but I didn't have my own phone line or anything, so I don't know what I thought I was going to do with this thing after I built it. But yeah, it was neat to find it anyway.
You'd be cool, and all of your friends would carry you around on their shoulders and go, "Yay, Quinn! Yay, Quinn!"
Yes, I'm sure that was the dream. Yes. I know what'll make me cool. I'll
Quinn's
start a BBS.
Quinn's our savior, BBS.
Yes, that'll make them stop beating me up at school.
Yes.
This is the teenage nerd logic. All right, moving right along. I guess we could have grouped our A2 Heaven hardware items together. That would have been smart.
Well.
But nope, we do not organize anything on the show for that folksy fireside chat feel. That or we're lazy. One of those two things is definitely the reason that we do these in random order.
Sure. Yep.
So Plowman of A2 Heaven is working on something in his Bulgarian Batcave. And he's asking to borrow a 2C Plus for a project. And I guess all I have to say about this is anyone who's anywhere in the vicinity, Western Europe, I guess, or anywhere in Europe perhaps, please lend him your 2C Plus, because whatever he builds is going to be amazing. And the 2C Plus is still slightly underserved in some of this hardware expansion stuff. So I hope it's perhaps some sort of memory card or internal, mocking board or something. Maybe he's doing something internal that he needs to test it on 2C Plus, or perhaps it's something SmartPort related because the 2C Plus has some weird little differences in the SmartPort. Something like that, I hope, is the case.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, it does. It's unfortunate because it is a little bit, I think, probably out of the range of practicality for most people here in the United States to get him one. So if you're in Europe, maybe France or something like that, fingers crossed.
Yeah, and they are uncommon enough that I think people are a little wary of just kind of sending one overseas on a lark. So hopefully there's someone geographically close to him that can lend him one.
Not that he's not trustworthy or anything, but the packages change hands a lot and they get banged up and fall off boats and stuff. So
yeah, I would not want to risk my own 2C Plus just through 18 post offices and airplanes and heaven knows what else would happen to it. So. But yeah, I do wish him the best because I really want to see whatever he produces, and I'm sure he will get my money for whatever it is.
Oh, yeah. And
let's see. The Goldbergs are back on the air, and this is fantastic. I actually came across this because Bill Budge, I think it was. It was Richard Garriott retweeted this, which I loved. So yeah, the Goldbergs got an Apple II computer lab in their school, and the references are insane. These writers did their homework.
No, don't worry, folks. No commentary this time from us. But this, I don't know about you, Quinn, but I know I whiled away many lunch hours in the Apple II computer lab at my high school. Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to go ahead and include some of the audio from the show here, and I hope that we're small enough to fly under the very litigious Disney lawyer radar, or whatever you want to call it, because Disney owns ABC, which is the channel that broadcasts the Goldbergs. But here is that.
As my dad got the win, I was still a lone loser without a table. My only choice was to accept my fate of eating alone under the bleachers. That is, until I stumbled upon my salvation.
Holy motherboard?
The high school computer lab. It had 6 state-of-the-art Apple IIs, each with double floppy drives and a dot matrix printer that can ink a whopping 6 lines per minute on that weird paper where you rip off the sides.
We're allowed to be in here. Okay.
Mr. Glasscott says we can stay the whole lunch period as long as we don't make crumbs, which is why I bring a thermos of soup every day.
Cool. Whoa, was that Prince of Persia?
We've got it all. Castle Wolfenstein, Load Runner, Choplifter, and Ultima parts 1, 2, 3, and 4.
You have part 4? That's the ultimate Ultima.
You know your stuff.
I'm Adam, by the way.
I'm Mike Levy. This is also Mike Levy.
You guys have the same name?
Yeah, but Mike Z is painfully shy, so it's not much of an issue.
I feel your pain. There's a senior also named Adam Goldberg. He's not happy to have me around.
Right on.
I'm actually pretty good at Oregon Trail.
So, yeah, definitely. The Goldbergs that started out, for me anyway, is sort of a not funny, why am I watching this kind of a show, and has really turned into a hilarious collection of 80s retro feels and memories and nostalgia. So the Apple II references notwithstanding, you should be watching the show.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, these writers are doing their homework, no question. I mean, they nail what it was like to have an Apple II computer lab in your junior high school and, be one of a couple of kids who sort of got it and what we were doing in those labs and everything. I mean, yeah, they just nailed it. So much like, like last time we talked about this here on the show and we did our little DVD commentary of an episode, very similar to that, In fact, this is even better. I mean, at one point, I guess we played the clip, but he literally rattles off a list of games and they get it all right. So those are the ones you would list,
If you remember last time, they mentioned that Ultima 4 and didn't have a save function. I think everybody went, what? But it seems like they paid attention, and good for the writers for making Cheese the Drive a thing.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Yeah, good on them for doing their homework. And and like you said, it's not just the Apple II stuff. All of the '80s nostalgia. They are applying that same attention to detail everywhere. The clothes, the hair, the cars. So it's definitely a fun watch just for the cultural nostalgia of it all.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Mike, you want to do a quick eBay segment?
Sure. Let's jump over to that first, and then we'll move on to other things.
Rare! Steve Jobs. Look what we found on eBay.
All right, so we don't talk about eBay on this show, as you know, but this will be brief. What do we got here, Mike? A homebrew portable 2GS.
Yeah, that's exactly what we have here. A portable homebrew Apple IIgs. This is not the first time somebody's done something like this. Obviously, Ben Heck's amazing Apple IIgs laptop that he put out back in 2008 is a beautiful thing. You can go look at that on his blog. Tony Diaz before that put a 2GS into a tower, and I think it sort of made that a little bit portable. But the difference between that and what we're looking at now is that this is something you can actually buy. Now, there are only 4 days and 18 hours left as we're recording this, so I don't know if we'll get this up in time for you to bid on it. It's currently at 201 euros, which is about $221. And it looks like this thing is located in Italy, and they do ship worldwide, but it doesn't say that it's free shipping. So I imagine if you're here in the States, it might be a little bit pricey to get this over to you.
Yeah, it's a shame. This thing is very cool, though. Yeah, in fact, of course, we had Ben Heck here on the show to talk about his 2GS laptop. I love that people are still trying this. This is great. The 2GS just seems like a really great candidate for this. It's got such great hardware, kind of self-contained within it, and it's begging to be carted around.
And it's even rack mountable. It looks like it's still got the handles on it, so you can just slide that right in there. Your 19-inch Dell rack.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really what our server rack at work is missing is a 2GS, I think.
Says it comes with a hard metal case and a 6-inch monochrome CRT, so you won't get color. They said it does include the keyboard. It's not in the photo, but it works and is in good cosmetic condition. So, this thing's pretty cool. And if you happen to win this, come talk to us about it because we'd love to hear more.
Yeah. Yeah, and either way, we'll link to the listing in the show notes so you can go back and look at the pictures after the fact.
Yep, there's some nice close-ups of the internals and the work that they've done to sort of reconfigure and realign everything. The back is interesting. It's got all kinds of test equipment ports, so it looks like maybe they were planning to use this in a lab or something. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, strange beast. All right, so moving along, we want to do one more segment here. This month, we're going to try something new. This was Mike's idea, and I think it was great. We're gonna do magazine flashbacks, and what we're gonna do is we're going to Mike and I are gonna read a copy of an issue of an old magazine, and then we're gonna kind of revisit it here on the show and share some thoughts on it.
Now, don't worry, this won't be nearly as boring as our commentary of the Goldbergs.
That's right.
And this, hopefully, I hope this will work because this idea is shamelessly ripped off from the Retro Maccast, where they're going through every issue of a Mac Addict right now, and they did Macworld as well. But we're going to go through. We're going to start with Softalk. We thought about doing Nibble, but and all of the Nibbles have been scanned as well, but you have to buy that. And we kind of figured that this is available out on the web, and you can just read along if you want to. So we'll get started with Volume 1, Number 1 of Softalk magazine from September 1980. Take us away, Quinn.
Yeah, well, this was a great read. I'd never read the very first issue of Softalk, so it was really fun to do. First thing that strikes you, of course, is the length. It's 32 pages, which could qualify as a beefy newsletter. But the other thing that strikes but the other thing that strikes me is, despite its svelteness early on, the production value was there right away. It's filled. They managed to fill all the advertising space, and it's professionally laid out and professional typography. I mean, they weren't messing around here. This is a professional publication right out of the gate. It's not like some magazines that kind of started as user group things or whatever and kind of evolved. The opening editorial by Margot Comstock, who was the keynote speaker at Kansas Fest a couple of years ago, is excellent. And one of the lines that she has in that editorial that I really liked is, she says that one of the reasons you might be reading this magazine is because, quote, you've chosen Apple for your computer. And I think that's a really telling kind of turn of phrase, because it captures what was a really big deal at the time, which is that there were like 20 home computers that you could buy, right? I mean, there was 4 or 5 major ones, but there were a lot of choices, and this was a big commitment. I mean, if you do the exchange rate or the inflation calculations, an Apple II at retail was, somewhere north of $5,000 or $6,000 in a very basic configuration. In today's dollars. So this was a huge investment, and you're committing to this thing for hopefully a really long time. In the case of the Apple II, potentially 10 years or more. So you had to think very carefully about that choice, and it mattered a great deal which one you chose. It's not like nowadays where it's like, okay, your choice is Mac or PC, and honestly, it doesn't really matter that much which one you choose, because they're both, you can run VMs for one or the other if you need a little bit of software that you can't get, and most software runs on both anyway, and it honestly doesn't matter that much, and more everything's being done on the web anyway, so platform matters so much less nowadays than it used to, despite all of the angry forum threads that you might read to the contrary. But it mattered tremendously back then, because most software did not come out for all machines. In fact, most of it only came out for 1 or maybe 2 of them. Games were often ported to, unless you had a Commodore 64, you couldn't really count on a game being available for your machine. You were kind of lucky if it got ported. So, it was a really big decision. And it was kind of nice to have this opening editorial that just said, you're our people. You've chosen Apple. We chose Apple. We all agree this was the right choice. So let's talk about it.
Well, and even if you had a version of your game for your platform that had the same title or the same mechanics as what appeared on the Commodore 64, they probably didn't look the same. They probably didn't sound the same, and they may not have even played the same. And one of the things that I really enjoyed looking at as I was reading through this was the ads, because it sort of says a lot about where the industry was at the time. And the first ad that I saw was this Exacom's Imp2 printer, 1 line per second, just $895.
Yeah.
And I'll talk more about the ads as we go through this, but there was a feel to the whole thing, like you said, very professional, and yet at the same time there's a little bit of a fanaticism there that kind of reminded me similarly of what you saw later on in Mac Addict, where people were very dedicated and loved this platform, and it came through in the articles and the topics that they chose to talk about. And I think that's what made this kind of one of the top flight magazines of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the ads also really reflected the machine's strengths. All these early ads, they're all productivity software for the most part, which is really what the Apple II was good at. Again, back to the choice of the machine being so critical, it said a lot about you, and not in the modern sense of how, your brand is whatever part reflects your personality, but it said a lot about what you wanted to do or what you thought you needed to do with a computer. And each machine was good at very different things. The Apple II was really great at productivity software, spreadsheets, word processing. Commodore 64 was really great at games. The Atari was really great at being overlooked. So each had their strengths and weaknesses, and I think you see that reflected in the ads.
They introduced a news talk segment, which kind of went through bites of news items in the industry, and especially with the Apple II. I like the mention of the move from online systems, move from CME to Coors Gold. Of course, everybody immediately assumes, like when you say Sierra Online, if you know anything about it, you think of that mountain. Mm-hmm. The icon that they chose for the logo, and that they were from Coors Gold in the mountainous area, but they started out in CME, and I'd even forgotten about that.
Yeah, I love that too. Little announcement that they'd moved their global headquarters, which, at the time, I guess it was 3 people or something. But we should say that this issue of Softalk's really early. What's the date? It's 1980, right?
Yeah, September of 80.
Yeah, so this is very, very early. So all of the ads are all small companies. They're all just someone in their garage, and they've made up some name, Prologue, technology systems or whatever, but it's one person. You can tell it's one person by the ads. It's clip art and stuff stuck together, and no screenshots of anything, just like a description of this is a high-res game where you shoot lasers or whatever, and just trying to sell you their software, basically sight unseen for $30. It's kind of adorable.
Yeah, and what's great about Softalk especially is it provides a great snapshot of where they were in the industry at the time. Not just the Apple II, but the microcomputer industry in general was mail order people, and for the Apple II it was like you said, spreadsheets and edutainment games, and little like Muse was still selling stuff on cassette, and Apple Computer, they even mentioned this, was sending representatives to vendor fairs at that time. Mm-hmm. Which, God, that would never happen now. But it was also at a time when things were growing like crazy. There's a mention of DC Hayes, the company that made those modems, announcing they had threefold growth in 12 months. So it was growing like crazy, and there was a mention of Mountain Hardware. It became Mountain Computer. And on the same page, there was an ad. Cavalry Systems sold this, a VCR interface peripheral to allow your Apple II to search videos by frame number, segment, or image name. Just $495.
Wow, yeah, with inflation, what is that, $1,500, something like that?
That's a down payment on a house or something.
Yeah, that's great. And one of the other ads that really jumped out for me was the SSI ad, one of the few from sort of a larger software company, Strategic Simulations Incorporated, I think. And they had an ad for some sort of tactical strategy game, their wheelhouse. And it didn't, there was sort of a screenshot, but it was tiny. Like there was, the only image in the ad was tiny in the bottom of the center of the page. And then there's a full page ad, and it's just a wall of text, which sort of tells you a lot about where the industry was, who the market was. Like people wanted all of this, information. You would never see that in a modern, gaming or computer magazine. It would just be all pictures, So it's just a solid wall of text that I guess you're supposed to read. And buried in there, when they're talking about the system requirements, they say that you need a mini floppy drive, a 5.25-inch mini floppy, which I liked. I liked that they had to specify mini. At this time, I guess 8-inch was still considered a plausible storage medium for the time. So the 5.25-inch were these crazy new tiny ones.
Yeah, very strange. There's a profile of Apple's newly hired manager, John Couch. If you know that name, it's probably from the Lisa project. He was mainly known for successfully keeping Steve Jobs away from Lisa, and which, diverted him to Macintosh. And of course, Jobs went on to kill the Lisa project. But he talks about profit centers and management by walking around and industry growth. And again, very that sort of fresh face, naive enthusiasm that was all over the industry at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like he was fairly new at Apple at the time, based on sort of the tone of this interview. But the whole management by walking around thing is kind of discredited now. But it was definitely the attitude of the time, I think. The theme of the interview is this thing called datagramming that he's really excited about, and he keeps going on and on about it. And there's several blurbs, there's several different contexts all throughout this issue about this quote datagramming. And they never really explain very well what it is, aside from it's clear he's really, really trying to coin that as a term, like really working that. He throws it in 6 times to every sentence, but as far as I can tell, what he's getting at is he wants a higher level programming languages for people, so that people who aren't programmers can kind of build applications. And it's sort of funny. You can tell again how early this is in the industry, because he kind of the example he cites is that his dad kept asking him to add features to this business analysis software that he had written for him on his Apple II. And, he was frustrated by having to constantly go and add another feature because his dad couldn't just expand it on his own without being a programmer. So this datagramming was sort of his holy grail solution to that. I think he was, first of all, sort of overlooking the potential of general purpose software. I think, pretty soon general purpose business software would come along that could easily do anything that anyone wanted. So this wasn't really the issue, I think, that it seemed like. But I think he was also perhaps thinking a bit along the lines of graphical programming languages, things like HyperCard that would come along much later, that kind of did allow sort of non-technical people to do some amount of kind of software development in a friendlier way. And that's still a hot topic nowadays, kind of non-programmer programming languages. So that's, in fact, Bill Budge talked about that when we had him on the show. That's an area of interest for him as well. Tools that will let people build software that involving just connecting boxes on the screen or whatever, kind of graphical tools for building new applications. So that definitely seems like something that is coming along. And if that's what he meant by datagramming, then great. He was a visionary and just ahead of his time. But I honestly couldn't tell exactly what he meant in all these interviews. He just kind of went on and on about datagramming and how great it was going to be.
His enthusiasm reminded me a whole lot of Alex Baldwin's Jack Donaghy Six Sigma enthusiasm on 30 Rock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But clearly a bright guy, and he did a lot of great stuff at Apple. So. And so the other big theme of this issue was the Star Wars connection, which was kind of neat. I'm assuming they got like the proper, permission to use all these images and stuff, because they have a Star Wars image on the front page or on the cover, and then there's a full screen piece of official Star Wars artwork inside the magazine as well, and then a couple of stories about how staff on the production were using their Apple IIs, which was pretty cool. So I guess I had no idea about this, but I guess they used an Apple II to organize the special effects clips at ILM. Industrial Light and Magic, that did all the special effects on Star Wars. So I guess I didn't know any of this, but if you are doing special effects in an analog world, the way they do that is by shooting many, many pieces of film that have different parts of the effect, and then they composite them all optically. And the challenge there is, a given effect, one single shot might have, 12 or 15 pieces of film involved, and they all have to be composited with specific time indices, and it's difficult to keep track of all that. So one of the staffers at ILM wrote a custom Apple II program to track all of these edits and stuff. And so the people doing the compositing could just type in, hey, I'm working on this such and such a shot, and I need this piece of film, and the program would tell them where to cut it in and where to composite it. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of maybe a little bit of a stretch to let's attach Apple II to the Star Wars thing, but I think they did a very good job. And there was a sidebar about how a filmmaker, I don't know if he was involved with Star Wars or not, but talked about how he uses the Apple II to manage talent contracts and things like that, which is another innovative way that they were using the Apple II back then. There was an ad for The Wizard and the Princess from Online Systems. High-Res Adventure number 2 sold for $32.95.
Yep.
Centauri Limited's Alpha Centauri organ keyboard for the Apple II was $1,295. Mecca announced the Tape 2, a tape drive that behaves like a disc, $500K for $499, less than $1 a K.
Yeah, that thing really interested me. The Tape 2. They claim it's random access and stores 500K or something, and it claims to work with all the normal random access basic commands, load, save, reload, etc. But there's no explanation of how it works, and I'm pretty curious about that.
Yeah, that would have been nice to see a larger ad or some sort of explanation. But
yeah.
I think it's one of those products that maybe sold 10 of them and you never heard from them again. Or I don't know. Tabletop wargaming company Avalon Hill made the leap into computer gaming. They debuted 5 cassette war games for the Apple II through the newly created subsidiary Microcomputer Games Incorporated. Very generic. Just $15 a cassette.
Amazing. Yeah, I think if there's a consistent tone throughout this, it's aspirational. There's every single ad, every single article, every single interview. It's all just sort of looking ahead to what everyone is just sure that these computers are going to do any day now. And, like circling back to the Star Wars interview, it was very much like that, where we just know that computers are going to be making movies any minute now. So let's find any connection that we currently have. And okay, someone's using an Apple II to do, some basic, what's basically a to-do list or something somewhere within the production. And there you go. See, computers are making movies, and it's just a couple more weeks or months here, and that we'll be doing the whole movie on the computer. We just know it. Just hang in there. Of course, it would be 30 years until that was true in any meaningful sense. But just everybody was just so excited about the whole thing.
A company called Artsky, or maybe it's Artsci. I always assumed it was Artsky because for a while, there was this thing where everybody was trying to associate their product with the word ASCII. So you had Petsky and Tasky and Artsky. They had the Magic Window word processor, an early attempt at WYSIWYG for $99.95. Online Systems Mystery House High-Res Adventure #1 sold for $24.95. And somebody named Lee Reynolds showed us how to use the integer basic con command, because that's back when int basic was still a thing.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting article, actually. What he explains is how you can trick AppleSoft into doing some types of commands that it doesn't normally support. And the example he gives is an indirect list. So you can call list from within your own program, but only with hard-coded line numbers. You can't say list, and then a variable name to start with a variable line number. And so what he does is he types in the command using print instead of list, so that the AppleSoft interpreter will accept it, and then shows you how to go into the monitor and change the token into a list token. And it will,
interesting.
And it will work because it's parsing the parameters independent of the action token. So it's just that the parser doesn't normally accept it. So it's kind of a neat trick. It's a very long article to get to that neat little trick, but it was kind of a fun read.
Online Systems offered Paddle Graphics, a set of software that allowed you to create art with your Apple Paddle for $39.95, or the Table Graphics version, which allowed you to use your Apple Graphics tablet for $49.95. Southwest Data Systems sold a Works package for $34.95 called the Correspondent, which included text processing, database, and a programming utility, sort of like an early AppleWorks, I guess. A company called Future World sold XY Genesis, a collection of AppleSoft subroutines to add graphics to your programs for $74.95. And VisiCalc cost $150. Next up, we had Softalk's Trade Talk column. Did you read that, Quinn?
I did a little bit, yeah. It was kind of neat industry gossip kind of stuff.
I like that they started it off by saying that they were lamenting how good news doesn't sell, and so you turn on the evening news and it's all bad news, and they were hoping to correct that with this column, and then immediately started off with this company. I don't know if this is true or not, but it almost sounds apocryphal. There's this company called PowerSoft, apparently an early pioneer in software publishing, that had the memories of all of its computers destroyed at once by a lightning strike, which also destroyed its phone and communication systems, because I guess the spike got through a Hayes modem and into the building wiring, and managed to kill its entire inventory of diskettes and tapes for sale, as well as its set of business records that resided on floppy.
Yeah, that sounds a little suspect to me. Sounds a bit urban legendy.
Or maybe at least overblown a little bit. There was an ad for something that would become ubiquitous, what my dad called snake oil. It was the FD08, a floppy drive head cleaning kit from a company called FSI. There was no price listed, but if you called before 1 p.m. local time, your order would ship that day.
And no doubt that call went to someone's house.
I'm sure it did, yeah.
One of the things I like to do is look at all these ads and look at the addresses of these quote-unquote companies. Yeah. And inevitably, they were just a house in some suburb in Reseda or something.
Apartment 38B.
That's right. Yes,
garden level. The Softalk noted that Business Week reported that Apple had sold 65,000 computers in 1979, and they expected to double that in 80. By comparison, Tandy sold 135,000, but business analysts expected Apple to overtake Tandy by 82 because Tandy's growth was slowing to just 15 to 20% a year. I think most companies would kill for those numbers these days.
That's for sure.
The Apple III gets a mention, pitting it against the IBM's commanding 46% market share in the business market. And they mentioned John Marino, a bicyclist who was attempting to break his own record of bicycling across the United States, 2,900 miles from LA to New York City. In 12 days, 3 hours and 31 minutes, apparently he was followed by a van which had an Apple II charting his course and his menu, which only included foods lab tested to be non-toxic to his body, which I guess was what, water?
Yeah, I don't know.
He did beat his record by a full day, so whatever it was, It was working.
Yeah, it's another strange claim.
Hanna-Barbera mentioned that they were going all digital for their cartoons from this point, and Disney, of course, stepped in and announced that they would never replace hand-drawn animations with computers. How's that working out for you guys?
Yeah. Again, that bold statement about 25 years too soon.
Softalk notes that the first computer camps were held over the previous summer, including the California Computer Camp in Los Padres National Forest, north of Santa Barbara. It was a standard summer camp, including swimming, horseback riding, but it included 1 to 2 hours daily of computer programming training, with the opportunity to buy one of the camp's computers at the end of the $795 2-week session.
That's kind of neat. I went to many computer camps as a youth, although by the time they came around to me, there was no horseback riding or anything. It was usually in a library, utilities room or something like that, or a school's gymnasium or something, and you just went there during the day and they taught you stuff. But I loved them. I thought that was a fantastic way to spend the summer.
Well, I'm sure that at that point, kids like us were too pale and sickly to, if you fall off a horse, you're going to break all your bones.
Yeah, they knew better than to expose us to direct sunlight by that point.
That's right, yeah. There's a mention of Universal Studios using an Apple to track extra dossiers for casting. And they had developed an interface for a Laserdisc system whereby an agent could view talent clips on a television screen simply by accessing the actor's dossier on the Apple II. And that's kind of cool.
Yeah, that is kind of neat.
And I think that kind of wraps it up. The back cover ad was for Personal Software's VisiCalc. And the other ad that caught my attention was iOS's this company called Information Unlimited Software sold Easy Writer, which I think was probably like playing off of Easy Writer movie name. But it was a word processor, Easy Mailer, which was a letter writer, and then Easy Mover, which was personal electronic mail, which I think maybe you should have called that Easy Mailer. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Another common theme is with these pieces of software and companies is bad puns throughout. Like everyone's trying to come up with a clever portmanteau or pun on some computery sounding word, which is pretty adorable.
I like the fact that back then it was still, they had to use typewriter ball artwork just as a metaphor because people still associated that sort of work with typewriters. But that's about it for the September 1980 Softalk. Did we miss anything, Quinn?
No, I think we pretty much got it.
I know I talked a lot there, so sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's quite all right. I would, we'll link to this issue in the show notes, and a nice, very readable PDF, and it's a quick read. I mean, 32 pages. You can literally read it front to back, including all the ads, in a Saturday morning. So it's a fun thing to do. As we get deeper into this, these issues are going to get much, much longer. So we'll probably start just jumping around and calling out a few things in each one. But
definitely.
This one, it was easy enough to go literally page by page.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and declare this a success. I had fun with it. Sounds like you did too. Let us write in. Let us know what you thought. And if it's great and everybody loves it, then I'm going to go ahead and take credit for this idea. And if not, then I'll blame the Retro Maccast guys.
Perfect. Yeah. Please do write us at feedback@open-apple.net and let us know if you liked the segment, or if it was boring, or if it was interesting. And maybe next time we want to just give people a heads up ahead of time so they can read the issue ahead of the episode and maybe follow along with us. Or I don't know, people can let us know what they think. I guess it's recorded so they can just see ahead of time and read it before they listen. Or I don't know, I'm spitballing here, but let us know what you think and if there's any changes to the segment that you might like. And, I know we have a lot of other segments that we haven't done in a while, but we will get back to those here pretty soon. We've had a lot of long interviews lately and other fun things like K-Fest happening, so we haven't done a lot of our traditional segments, but always nice to have a new one to throw in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, don't forget that we do have a Patreon. And while this is free and always will be, and is pretty much advertising free, except for this little bit right now, if you like what you hear and you feel like donating, we're happy to take that, because the hosting costs aren't free. It's not break the bank or anything like that, but it's not free. And any contribution helps, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah. We're strictly on the NPR model here, where we occasionally beg you for money.
That's about it.
And otherwise, it's all free. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. Any closing thoughts, Mike?
No, thanks everybody for listening again. And I know that it's kind of a slow time of the Apple II season, I guess, with Christmas is still a few months away, and Kansas Fest is a couple of months behind us. So we'll just keep doing this, and I guess maybe next month we'll take a look at the next issue of Softalk. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. Well, in the meantime, we'll see you later, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Subscribe to us in iTunes or visit us at open-apple.net, where you can browse our extensive catalogue of past episodes or read our blog. If you like what you've heard today, or even if you didn't, your comments, questions or ideas are always welcome. Send them to feedback@open-apple.net.
Just wait till they see my BBS. It's got a door game.